The poor boy accidentally entered a wealthy family and conspired, becoming the second young master of the wealthy family, using the resources of wealthy families to borrow chickens and lay eggs. It's too slow. I want to turn the entire wealthy family into mine. The daughter of Uncle C's family is a bit cute. We must get it. The secretary is also very punctual. I have to take it down. Looking back, the bed at home is a bit small and cannot accommodate 3 people. Turn around and look at the secretary. Why don't you come back tomorrow night? Chapter 1. Capturing Consorts. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In front of the intensive care unit, Wu Nan was holding the latest report given by the doctor in her hand, with her head lowered. In the ward behind him, his mother lay down. Suddenly, the phone rang. He instinctively answered, and from the other end of the phone came the anxious voice of his roommate. Nancy, it's not good. What's going on? Wu Nan's reply was very calm. However, his roommate's next sentence still caught his attention. I saw Ling Weiwei entering the hotel with a man, and I have already found out the room number. Come and catch the rape. Ling Weiwei, a senior female student at Jiangqing University, is Wu Nan's girlfriend. He replied to the phone, I'll be right there. 10 minutes later, Wu Nan arrived at the Star Hotel near Jiangqing University, which displayed a 4-star sign, making many people hesitant. Roommate Wang Chang is currently standing at the hotel entrance, looking around with his phone in hand. Nancy. Over here. Wang Chang is his best friend. He has been in the same class since high school and has been a roommate since college, so he can't be more iron. Similarly, Wang Chang also knew Ling Weiwei, and the 3 of them were admitted to Jiangda, a relatively ordinary 3-tier university. Wang Chang led him through the lobby and arrived at the elevator entrance in a fierce manner, pushing up the building one by one. However, when they entered the elevator, the 2 suddenly realized that they couldn't get in without a room card. Chang, how did you get the room number? Wu Nan has some doubts. I overheard it. Today, as soon as I left the school gate, I noticed that Ling Weiwei was wearing a seductive outfit. Just as I was about to say hello, I saw him greeting a man who drove an Audi. I felt something was wrong at the time and followed him all the way. Later, at the entrance of this hotel, I heard the man mention room 902. Damn it, I saw her holding that man up in the elevator with my own eyes. Wang Chang explained in a very positive atmosphere, thinking that he was the one wearing the green hat. To be honest, I finally understood today. She's just a gold digger. No matter what the outcome is today, you must get back the 20,000 yuan she owes you. Wu Nan fell into silence, and the image of Ling Weiwei being with him flashed in her mind. They have known each other since high school, classmates, and later went to college together. It was confirmed that their relationship was in their sophomore year. At that time, Ling Weiwei's family encountered something and asked him to borrow 20,000 yuan. For a college student, 20,000 is not a small amount. It is only through frugality in various part-time jobs that he can barely scrape together. Ling Weiwei overcame the difficulties with money, and since then they have established a relationship. Wu Nan herself doesn't know what she likes about her, perhaps because she is familiar with her. In addition, Ling Weiwei is more proactive, and he is a person who doesn't know how to refuse. The embarrassment of not having a room card is having to wait for someone at the elevator entrance. At this moment, Wu Nan was thinking about how he would handle it if he went up and was really caught in bed. At that time, my mind was hot and I wanted to ask about the situation, but now it's a bit difficult to get off the hook. However, the development of the matter did not give him any time to think, and someone came immediately. They arrived at the 9th floor as they wished, and 902 was right at the elevator entrance. Wu Nan looked at the door number and was about to knock, but she couldn't knock down. It's all here, why are you hesitating? I'll knock, you stand next to me first. Wang Chang pushed him to the side, in a position that was invisible to the cat's eye, and then began to bang the door. At first, there was no movement inside knocking on the door, and it felt like no one was there. Wu Nan was once again grateful, thinking that Wang Chang had heard the room number wrong. Ling Weiwei. Open the door for me, I know you're inside. Wang Chang roared and continued to smash the door, firmly believing that what he heard was definitely 902. Sure enough, the door was finally opened. It was Ling Weiwei who opened the door. At this moment, she was only wrapped in a large bath towel, and her hair was still wet. Obviously, she had just taken a shower. What are you doing here? From Ling Weiwei's perspective, she only saw Wang Chang alone, with a very strong tone. Wang Chang also realized this and said politely, "What are you doing here again? Is Nanzi in the room?" At this moment, a man's slightly lewd voice came from the suite, accompanied by the sound of flowing water, indicating that it was from the bathroom. "Vivi, come over here quickly, I can't wait anymore." Ling Weiwei immediately changed her tone and responded coquettishly, "I'll be right there." Turning her head, she spat out a rolling word to Wang Chang, about to close the door. But she couldn't fulfill her wish, and the door got stuck in Wang Chang's shoes. "Look at it yourself, she's going to take a bath with someone else." Wu Nan was dragged out of the corner by Wang Chang, but he just stood there, looking at Ling Weiwei with a worried expression on his face, without saying a word. "Wu Nan. You." At that moment, Ling Weiwei was also panicked, but she quickly adjusted and took a breath, feeling relieved instead. "Can you explain it?" Wu Nan held his breath and only asked this question in the end. Ling Weiwei couldn't help but sneer and then said with a nonchalant expression, "What else are you explaining? It's just what you think. But we haven't broken up yet, have we?" Ling Weiwei almost laughed angrily, her expression somewhat out of control, and she said confidently, "Please, are we married? Are we protected by the law? I can sleep with anyone I want. Can you control it?" Wu Nan suddenly choked on his words. The movement at the door caught the attention of the man in the suite, and soon he heard the footsteps of his slippers wiping the floor. A man with a bare upper body walked out. The man wiped his glasses with a towel and put them on, then carefully examined Wu Nan and the other two. "Who are these two?" Ling Weiwei hurriedly explained, "It's just a college classmate. You go to bed first, I'll be fine in a while." Wang Chang suddenly felt displeased and said, "What classmate? This is his boyfriend. And which onion are you?" Seeing that Wang Chang had offended the man, Ling Weiwei immediately changed her face and shouted with a stronger aura than Wang Chang, "If you two don't leave, I'll call the security guard. How did you sneak into such a high-end hotel without a room card?" Wu Nan's eyes widened when he saw this scene. He had known Ling Weiwei for so long and had never seen her become so angry before. What kind of identity was this man in front of him that she had to maintain so much? Faced with Wang Chang's offense, the naked man remained calm. He lit a cigarette and continued to examine the two with a playful smile. Ling Weiwei, on the other hand, carefully turned around to take care of the man's emotions after scolding Wang Chang. "Director Zhao, they are all brainless students. Don't think too much of them. Wang Chang, I warn you, don't meddle in your affairs with a dog or a mouse. Wu Nan doesn't mind himself, what are you up to there?" Ling Weiwei no longer cared about Wang Chang, but looked coldly at Wu Nan and said, "I won't talk nonsense anymore. The two of us are cut off now. You hurry up and take this crazy dog with you." Wu Nan remained silent, unable to even vent his anger when faced with an adulterous man and a promiscuous woman. He was extremely cowardly. At this moment, Wang Chang was still quite tough. He stood in front of Wu Nan and said bluntly, "Since it's all done in one fell swoop, then the 20,000 yuan you owe Nanzi must also be counted. Take out the 20,000 yuan now, and we'll leave immediately." Chapter 2. Car Accidents. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Catching traitors and demanding bribes made Wu Nanyue feel more and more uncomfortable. He tugged at Wang Chang's sleeve and whispered, "Brother Chang, why don't we just let it go? Let's go. Wang Chang was furious for a moment and pushed Wu Nan away, angrily saying, Nanzi, you coward, get out of here. I must get this money back for you today. After speaking, he reached out one hand and opened the payment code on his phone with the other. Cash or transfer, you can choose for yourself. Ling Weiwei looked at the clear payment code and froze in a daze. She didn't have the money to pay it back and had no plans to do so, so she could only turn her gaze to Wu Nan. Wu Nan, you're just a coward. After dating and breaking up, you still want to settle the accounts. Are you still not a man? Wu Nan was about to speak when Wang Chang stuttered again. Nanzi, please shut up and don't argue with this woman anymore. Haven't you seen it clearly? She's just looking at your honesty and deliberately deceiving you of the money. No matter what, you have to pay back these 20,000 yuan today. Otherwise, you won't want to close the door. Speaking, he took a step forward and locked the door with his entire body. At this moment, the naked man finally couldn't help but take out his phone and scan Wang Chang's payment code. With a ding sound, he completed the transfer. Alright, I'll pay back the 20,000 on her behalf. Do you have anything else to say now? Wu Nan and Wang Chang were both stunned, especially Wang Chang. He carefully confirmed the decimal point and confirmed that 20,000 instead of 200 had been received. The next second, he looked at Wu Nan with disbelief on his face. For college students who have not yet graduated, 20,000 yuan is a huge sum of money, not to mention being paid casually. Making a decision of 20,000 yuan requires thinking for several overnight hours. But the man in front of me, who is wearing glasses and has a very curvaceous figure, has casually paid 20,000 yuan for someone else. How rich he must be. Seeing Wu Nan's reaction, the naked man was very satisfied. He then hugged Ling Weiwei in his arms and deliberately looked at Wu Nan, asking, do you still have any questions now? Wu Nan suddenly had a feeling of being wearing a green hat in front of her and being slapped with money. Fortunately, over the years, he has always been so cowardly, and at this moment, he doesn't feel the humiliation of ups and downs. But when he turned around and left, he still felt his breathing difficult and asked himself in his heart why he didn't give the man a kick. In the end, they just got on the elevator in a disheveled manner. After leaving the Star Hotel, he and Wang Chang went to the usual food stall and ordered 2 5-yuan fried rice and 2 bottles of wine. After Wang Chang sat down, he forcefully pried open a bottle of wine, and half of the bottle was dried, as if venting his anger. After putting down the wine bottle, he took out his phone and transferred the money to Wu Nan. I know Auntie is sick. Now that you're short of money, why are you being polite to that woman? Wu Nan picked up her phone and was surprised to find that she had received 25,000 instead of 20,000. Chang, you. I don't have that man's money, so I only have these 5,000 left in my hand. You can use them first. Anyway, I'm going to intern next month, and I can afford to live and eat in the factory. Wang Chang also pretended to have a nonchalant expression, drinking and eating while turning around to remind Wu Nan, drink some too. Don't smoke or drink, you don't look like a man either. Wu Nan glanced at the beer bottle on the table. He never drinks, but he also knew the truth of getting drunk and solving 1,000 worries, but he still shook his head. I won't drink anymore. I have to go for a ride tonight. Thank you, Brother Chang. I will repay your money. Wang Chang sighed and took Wu Nan's bottle of wine to his side. He casually said, I heard that there are many wealthy people coming out of Jiangling Hotel at night, and some of them also need to drive on their behalf. You can try it out. If you can meet a wealthy man, see if you can let him make a charity donation. Wu Nan nodded. This method sounds idealistic, but for him now, he can give it a try. Just 2 months ago, his mother was suddenly diagnosed with cancer. Due to her severe condition, she was directly admitted to the intensive care unit and had to spend a lot of money every day. Originally, his father was planning to sell the house in exchange for money to save his mother, but the house was sold and his father also disappeared. But this is not the worst. Just this morning, he received the evaluation report from the doctor, which stated that the first surgical fee would be 2 million yuan and must be paid within a month, otherwise it would delay the condition. He's just a senior student about to intern, where did he get 2 million? These days he's been feeling confused, only knowing he can't stop. Once he gives up, his mother will be gone, and his home will be gone. During the day, he took on various part-time jobs, and at night he went to drive on behalf of others, squeezing himself to the fullest extent possible until he died. This seemed to be his only roar in the face of life. As night falls, the entrance of Jiangling Hotel is bustling with traffic and laughter everywhere. Wu Nan crouched under the street lamp, paying close attention to every guest who walked out. The evening breeze was very cold, and he missed several customers. His peers rushed to grab orders faster than him. Quickly, he was the only one left at the hotel entrance, but just then a pair of young men hugged each other and walked out. "Xiao Yuan, let's call a substitute driver." "I didn't bring a driver with me today." The relatively burly man confessed and then vomited. The man who was called Xiao Yuan appeared somewhat awkward. After a moment of reaction, he looked around and then locked onto Wu Nan. Wu Nan quickly stepped forward, picked up the vomiting man, and helped him to a luxury car. He helped the drunken man onto the right seat of the rear car, followed by another man named Xiao Yuan sitting on the left side of the back seat. "Go to the Li Group building." The man who called Xiao Yuan gave the address, but this time he spoke relatively quickly, not as clumsy as before. After driving a distance, he saw through the rearview mirror that the man named Xiao Yuan was still awake and planned to mention the donation. But at this moment, the car in the opposite lane suddenly lost control and collided directly, leaving him with no way to avoid it. After an unknown amount of time, he vaguely heard some sounds. "Immediately block the scene and don't let the news go out. The experiment is ready and can start. Everyone signs a confidentiality agreement." After his gaze flickered, he saw glaring lights hitting his face, and a group of doctors in white coats were in a flurry in front of him. Quickly, he lost consciousness. Chapter 3. Brainstorming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ah. Wu Nan woke up from a nightmare, feeling a splitting headache, as if her head had cracked open. Subconsciously, he could vaguely hear a strange woman talking, but he didn't understand what she was saying and followed her closely as if she had left. When he opened his eyes, he saw an unfamiliar ceiling and soft lighting. "If you want to survive, just do as I say. No matter what happens later, you can only blink and cannot speak." Before he could observe the surroundings, a bald middle-aged man wearing a white coat and antique round glasses stared at him with a serious expression and said a sentence without a trace. Judging from his attire, the person in front of him should be a doctor, but the way and content of his speech are more like a spy. Wu Nan felt a chill in his heart, as if the other person's posture was not a joke. He appeared here in a daze, still wanting to ask. However, just as he was about to speak, a cold chill pressed against his waist and hit a crucial point, giving him a feeling of being stabbed to his neck. Obviously, the other party is using some kind of weapon to threaten. The bald man's eyelids trembled as if to confirm again, urging Wu Nan to make a decision. Wu Nan struggled to swallow her saliva and then nodded. At this moment, the door of the room was suddenly pushed open, and a voice of anxiety and surprise came through. "Xiao Yuan." Did Xiao Yuan wake up? Wu Nan immediately recognized that this was the voice of the woman in her subconscious. She seemed to have just left, but then turned back. It was also at this moment that he realized he was lying in the hospital bed, and this was a ward. He remembered he was driving, but in the blink of an eye, he arrived here. After a moment of mental pain, he remembered that he seemed to have had a car accident. At the moment of the car accident, he thought he was going to leave the world first, and at that moment, he rarely felt relaxed. But now it seems that the car accident did not save his life, and maybe it will make things worse for him again. These negative emotions flashed by, and he noticed the present moment because what was happening before him was very eerie. The bald doctor who had previously threatened him regained his composure and turned to deal with the incoming person. Wu Nan turned her head and found that the person coming was a middle-aged woman with a slightly weathered appearance, but her clothes revealed a feeling of high price. Xiao Yuan. Xiao Yuan, you're awake. The woman repeated a strange name in her mouth, but couldn't wait to rush towards Wu Nan's location, which made Wu Nan frown involuntarily. Due to his mother's long-term hospitalization, he also has some understanding of the hospital wards. He is currently living in the most expensive VIP ward, with only one patient in the room, which should be him. However, he completely does not know this woman. And, it seems like I've heard the name Xiao Yuan before somewhere. Just as he was confused, the bald doctor stopped the excited woman and explained, "Second madam, Master Xiao Yuan has indeed woken up, but his current condition is not good and he needs to rest." The woman's eyes were moist, and she glanced at Wu Nan on the hospital bed, especially when she saw the other person's slightly blinking eyes. It seemed like a huge stone had been placed in her heart, and she suddenly felt much more relaxed. She didn't become stubborn anymore, but instead looked at the bald doctor and instructed, "Dr. Jiang, Xiao Yuan is on your behalf. If he has any situation, you must contact me as soon as possible." After speaking, she looked at Wu Nan on the bed and said gently, "Xiao Yuan, be good and listen to the doctor's advice. When you recover, Mom will come and pick you up." Now Wu Nan was completely stunned. The other person was indeed talking to him, and the tone seemed to be coaxing a child. At this moment, various questions flooded his mind, but he felt some substantial pain. "Madam Heir, don't worry, young Master Xiao Yuan is fine. The old man must be very busy with things. You don't need to run back and forth recently. I will contact you as soon as young Master Xiao Yuan is discharged from the hospital." The bald doctor calmed the woman's emotions, but the micro-movements were already seeing off the guests. The woman was also invited to the door unconsciously, and finally left with a reluctant gaze. When the woman left, only Wu Nan and Dr. Baldness remained in the ward. Wu Nan couldn't help but point to his mouth, indicating whether he could speak. After receiving a positive answer, he couldn't wait to ask, what was the situation just now? Why did she call me Xiao Yuan? However, Dr. Jiang calmly closed the curtains and then looked at him calmly, saying, "Your name is Wu Nan, right?" Upon hearing the familiar name, Wu Nan finally confirmed that she had not traveled like in fantasy novels after a car accident. After Dr. Jiang spoke, he didn't rush to say too much, but checked the various instruments near the hospital bed on his own. After all the data was normal, he smiled and looked at Wu Nan. "Don't panic, I'll explain it to you. Do you still remember having a car accident?" Wu Nan nodded hastily and did not intend to interrupt. He just stared seriously at the other person's reflective circular glasses, as if there were a pair of eyes that could see through everything under the light. Dr. Jiang continued, 3 days ago, the 2 passengers you carried were 2 sons of the Li Group, and one of them is still the current chairman of the Li Group's board of directors. Do you know that? Li Group. Li Group building. Wu Nanmeng's reaction came over. The destination given by the customer before was the Li Group building. At that time, he just thought these 2 people were going near the building and casually reported a landmark. As for the Li Group, he certainly knows that no one in the entire Jiangqing is unaware of it, because it is the largest enterprise in the area, covering multiple fields. The people of Jiangqing may not be able to escape this behemoth for their entire lives. At this moment, he became nervous again. "This accident is not my fault, it's the other party." Before he could finish explaining, Dr. Jiang interrupted him. "Don't get excited yet. The accident has already been investigated and everything else has been handled." Upon hearing this, Wu Nan breathed a slight sigh of relief, and then Dr. Jiang said, "Actually, this accident is very serious. As the other party's car collided head-on from the left side, it caused fatal injuries to the driver sitting on the left side and the young master Li Xiuyuan in the back seat. Upon hearing this, Wu Nan's eyelids couldn't help but jump. So, isn't he already dead? At this point, Dr. Jiang continued to explain, normally, you are basically dead, but you have encountered me. You should have heard of organ transplantation, haven't you? Before Wu Nan could respond, Dr. Jiang continued to explain, while Wu Nan just stared at him with big glasses. At that time, your body was completely necrotic, but your head was still intact under the protection of the airbags. On the contrary, young Master Li Xiuyuan suffered a severe shock to his head and his brain had already died. In order to minimize casualties, I conducted a bold experiment and switched your brain to young Master Li Xiuyuan's body. At this moment, Wu Nan's glasses turned red and his breathing stopped for a moment. The next second, he quickly picked up the small mirror on the table next to him. As Dr. Jiang said, he saw a strange and somewhat familiar face in the mirror, which was one of the passengers he received that night. Chapter 4. Transactions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In Wu Nan's view, switching one's brain to another body is a reasonable explanation for soul piercing. For a moment, he still struggled to accept it, until he tried to control his whole body and took a few steps back and forth in the hospital room without feeling any discomfort, before finally relaxing. And this process, fully displayed under Dr. Jiang's research-oriented gaze, even made the corners of his mouth slightly upward, which was difficult to conceal. Since that's the case, why don't you tell them the truth? Here, Wu Nan actually refers only to Li Xiuyuan's mother who has just left. This is the key point I want to talk to you about next. The technology of brain swapping is strictly prohibited internationally, and there are also many technical difficulties with brain swapping itself. I have been secretly researching for many years and have made breakthroughs. Your ability to survive now is the best proof. Because this technology cannot be made public, what happens to you cannot be discovered by others, do you understand? For Wu Nan, who has received higher education, this is understandable and acceptable, but as the person involved, he is a bit confused at the moment. So what should I do next? Should I keep playing Li Xiuyuan? According to the plot of the soul-piercing novel, he can survive with a new identity, but in the novel, the male protagonist inherits the host's memory, and he knows almost nothing about Li Xiuyuan, which is too easy to expose. Dr. Jiang didn't rush to respond, but instead took out a tablet and prepared to play something. I saw Dr. Jiang clicking on a live streaming screen on his tablet. The environment in the live broadcast scene, which Wu Nan is extremely familiar with, is the intensive care unit. In the center of the screen, there is a frail figure of a woman, surrounded by various medical equipment, who is his mother. My mother was originally resting with her eyes closed, seemingly emotionally stable. However, as soon as the supervising doctor left for a while, she suddenly stood up and prepared to remove the infusion needle from her body, with a posture of piercing her throat. She wants to commit suicide, she doesn't want to burden her son anymore, especially every time she sees his tired expression after crazy work, she feels heartbroken to the bone. Don't. In front of the screen, Wu Nan's heart was also twisted, as if she was about to rush into the screen. Fortunately, the supervising doctor discovered the situation at the first time, stepped forward to stop it, and began to soothe it. Obviously, this was not the first time it had happened. At this moment, Wu Nan's eyes turned red and he looked at Dr. Jiang beside him, asking, "What are you doing?" Dr. Jiang, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face. After turning off his tablet, he opened a paper file bag. Wu Nan just glanced at it and knew it was the file bag used by the hospital to store medical records. As a doctor, of course I want to talk to you about your mother's condition. I have checked your mother's illness, and I have also met with the attending doctor. In fact, your mother's illness is not simple. The first 2 million yuan surgical fee is only an appetizer, and subsequent lifelong medication treatment is required. These drugs are very expensive, and this disease is also known as the rich man's disease in the folk. The original doctor was afraid that you would be negative, so he didn't dare to tell you in the first place. He planned to wait until after the surgery, provided that you could afford the surgery fee. As he spoke, Dr. Jiang presented him with a detailed medical record and pointed out some key points. Of course, Wu Nan had read this medical record report, but at that time, he was just stunned when he saw the first surgical fee at the beginning. As for the subsequent treatment plan, he has also roughly reviewed it, but the cost of the medication is not indicated in the document, so he has not considered it temporarily. Dr. Jiang, in order to make him believe, took out his phone and searched for some information about the prices of these drugs. Of course, the hospital's internal database he searched for was not visible on the internet. Wu Nan glanced and realized that at this moment, his thoughts had already come to a standstill. As for whether Dr. Jiang would deceive him, there was no need to do so. He only needed to pay attention and find out the truth, so this is true. Seeing Wu Nan's expression, Dr. Jiang confirmed that the other party had believed his words, so he continued, "It's not too late for you to know this now, unless you don't want to save your mother." Wu Nan immediately denied, "Of course I have to save her. She is my mother, and I will save her no matter what." While speaking, he did not hesitate at all. Even after knowing the truth about his illness, he remained steadfast. For him, the only thing worth his nostalgia for in this world is his mother. When he was a child, cuddling with his mother was the happiest time of his life, but since leaving her to live alone, he has almost become a joke. Upon hearing this answer, Dr. Jiang's lips slightly curved upwards. "Great, now that we have confirmed this, our next conversation will be meaningful." Wu Nan suddenly became somewhat alert, wondering if she might have fallen into a certain trap. At this moment, Dr. Jiang continued, "How about we make a deal? Can you help me keep the secret of the brain replacement experiment and I'll pay the first surgical fee for you? How about that?" Wu Nan was stunned. The first surgery cost 2 million yuan. This money is basically an impossible task for him to complete. "Why are you helping me?" Wu Nan's first reaction was that Dr. Jiang was helping him, not a transaction at all. If it weren't for Dr. Jiang, he would have been a dead person now. How could he have earned medical expenses for his mother? Dr. Jiang smiled, but his eyes became strange when he went to see him again. "You can understand it as me helping you, or you can use these 2 million as a selling contract. I want to buy your life." Wu Nan became alert again, and he calculated in his heart that with his education and ability, he would probably only be able to earn 2 million in his lifetime without eating or drinking. It seems that selling himself like this is not impossible. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Dr. Jiang stopped playing tricks and replied directly, "It's actually quite simple. I just want you to continue playing the role of Li Xiuyuan, but the premise is that you won't be caught by the Li family. Can you do it?" Wu Nan is even more confused. It sounds like a good thing to have him play the role of a wealthy second generation for life. Just as he was feeling confused, Dr. Jiang's next sentence caught his attention. In fact, Li Xiuyuan is not an ordinary wealthy second generation person, and he is not even a normal person. Wu Nan's expression gradually became solemn and he quickly asked, "Why?" "Because Li Xiuyuan is an autistic patient, in simple terms, he is a fool." Chapter 5. Job Fairs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Xiuyuan is actually a fool. Wu Nan immediately recalled the scene when he picked up the guests that night, and Li Xiuyuan's state was indeed very strange. According to Dr. Jiang, Li Xiuyuan's intelligence has remained at the level of a 4-year-old child due to his autism, and the Li family has also given up on his training. If it weren't for his mother crying to death to obtain 0.2% of the group's shares for him, he would have basically had nothing. Even the small amount of share dividends will temporarily belong to the group and be given to him when it is appropriate. Simply put, it means waiting for Li Xiuyuan's parents to die before giving him a sum of money to help him survive on his own. Have you ever understood autism? Wu Nan was a bit absent-minded, but still nodded. He had seen this disease in the news, which seemed to be a more serious neurodevelopmental disorder, usually manifested as social interaction disorders, narrow interests, or some strange behaviors. In short, in the eyes of outsiders, it is somewhat abnormal, to put it bluntly, a fool. Actually, playing a fool is easier than playing a normal person. Just remember, from now on, you are just a 4-year-old child with intelligence. If you act childish, you won't attract the attention of the Li family. At this moment, Wu Nan suddenly realized that no wonder Dr. Jiang was willing to pay 2 million yuan. It turned out that he wanted to play a fool for life. But what he cares about is not these things. Even without this one, he used to live like a fool, but what should his mother do with her future medical expenses? He didn't care at first because he fantasized that as long as he could become a wealthy second generation, his mother's medical expenses would not be a problem, but the fact is, even if he became a wealthy second generation, he wouldn't have money. If I play the role of a fool, what will happen to the subsequent medical expenses? Will you help me pay for it? Dr. Jiang shook his head and said, "Don't be too greedy. 2 million is already my limit. You have to figure out what to do next, but you may not have a chance, after all, you have entered a wealthy family." After pausing, Dr. Jiang solemnly added, "Your most important thing now is to play the role of Li Shuyuan well, understand?" Realizing the change in Dr. Jiang's tone, Wu Nan immediately dared not say more. "Here is the information I have compiled about Li Shuyuan and the Li family. Please take a good look." Dr. Jiang took out some more documents and was about to explain when his phone in his pocket rang. Upon hearing the familiar sound, Wu Nan immediately realized that it was his phone. Dr. Jiang waited until the bell finished before returning the phone to him. He took the phone and it was in good condition, but it showed around 10 missed calls. Except for a few from the hospital, the rest were from Wang Chang. He immediately glanced at the date and breathed a sigh of relief. It had only been 2 days since his disappearance. He reflexively dialed Chang's phone number, and Dr. Jiang immediately stopped him. However, the phone had already been answered, and it seemed that Wang Chang had been waiting for the call, so as soon as the bell rang, it was answered. "Nanzi. Where have you been these past few days? If you don't answer the phone or the dormitory, it's really urgent. If you don't answer the phone again today, I'm going to report it to the police." On the other end of the phone came a series of complaints from Wang Chang. Wu Nan also realized that her current voice couldn't communicate on the phone, so she immediately cut off the call and instead sent a WeChat message. "Chang, my throat is uncomfortable and I can't call anymore. I met a friend these days and stayed with him for 2 nights. Wang Chang hesitated for a while in the chat interface before replying with a voice message. "You have other friends in Jiangqing, why don't I know? Forget it, you're fine. In fact, since my mother fell ill, a few relatives have cut off from them, fearing that they would come to borrow money. Immediately after, even my father disappeared, let alone my friends." Now that Wu Nan can speak, the only one who cares about his life and death is Chang Gu. Thinking of this, he suddenly asked Dr. Jiang. "Don't the outside world know about the car accident?" Normally, Wang Chang must have gone to Jiangling Hotel to look for him, but why didn't he mention the car accident? Sure enough, Dr. Jiang explained, because it involved the Li group and was afraid of media speculation, the group did public relations and suppressed the situation. Then Dr. Jiang reminded, "Remember, your identity cannot be exposed." Wu Nan nodded, and then Wang Chang sent another voice message. "Let me tell you, I found out who that glasses man is. I heard he is the head of the Human Resources Department of the Li Group. This year, the Li Group made an unprecedented move to recruit students at our school. In the past few days, I went to see him, and Ling Weiwei, that slut, did indeed submit a resume. But whether to say it or not, Li's group is really the #1 plutocrats in Jiangqing. The minimum salary for all the positions is 5 figures. I envy women like Ling Weiwei, who can take off their clothes and rise to the sky. I want to be a woman and a beautiful woman in his mother's next life. Listening to Wang Chang's repeated voice attacks, Wu Nan looked at Dr. Jiang with some embarrassment and quickly switched to text. Dr. Jiang smiled and casually said, I still have some faith in the Li group. You can ask your friend to go for an interview, and I can help. Wu Nan was immediately overjoyed. He was worried about how to repay Changgu for taking care of him. He didn't expect the opportunity to come so quickly. He quickly replied to a message. Chang, you can also try submitting your resume. My friend said he has a relationship with the Li group and can help. After this message was sent, Changgu didn't respond for half a day. After a while, the phone came and Wu Nan immediately cut it off. Next came another voice message. Nanzi, are you talking in your sleep? I'm not sure how capable your friend is. Have you encountered a scam? Hurry up and answer my phone, otherwise I'll still call the police. The phone rang again, and Wu Nan didn't rush to hang up. Instead, she looked at Dr. Jiang with a pleading gaze. If you ask him to go for an interview, I will meet him as your friend. Once the interview is over, he will believe me. Dr. Jiang proposed such a solution, and Wu Nan also felt it was feasible, so she cut off the phone and replied with a paragraph. I feel really uncomfortable today and don't want to talk. You will attend the interview tomorrow, and my friend will come to see you. After meeting, you will know it's true. After waiting for a while, Wang Chang finally replied, okay, I'll trust you once. The next day, Wu Nan changed into an assistant outfit and left the hospital with Dr. Jiang. At first, Dr. Jiang did not allow him to go out. He was easily exposed without formal contact with the Li family, but Wu Nan always held a skeptical attitude towards his own experiences. If he did not see the outside world with his own eyes, he seriously suspected that he had delusions. Fortunately, everything outside the hospital is normal, familiar streets and alleys of Jiangqing, and familiar gates of Jiangqing University. The interview meeting of Li Group was arranged in the lobby of the Star Hotel, and the people queuing up for the interview were all fresh graduates from Jiangqing University. The team lined up from the conference room in the lobby all the way to the door, and there were also several major detours. Wu Nan and Dr. Jiang walked into the hall and scanned along the long dragon team, only to find Wang Chang. But right in front of the restroom in the lobby, a man squatted there, smoking a cigarette and repeatedly looking at his job application resume. It was Wang Chang. Chapter 6. Green Channel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wang Chang had no hope for this interview. He knew his weight and couldn't even handle his resume. This morning when he came over to see so many people, he instantly became discouraged and thought that if Wu Nan's friend didn't show up, he wouldn't have to find himself bored. At that moment, Ling Weiwei came out of the women's toilet next to her. Today, she was wearing a small skirt with buttocks wrapped, and she was painting exquisite makeup. The wind she walked with was full of perfume. She didn't wash her hands, and the first thing she did when going out was to put her phone into her shoulder bag, indicating that she only went to the bathroom to make a phone call. Wang Chang. Why are you here? At first glance, she was surprised to see Wang Chang, but quickly locked onto his resume and sneered, You're also here for an interview. Didn't I hear that you're going to the factory? It's a place to eat and stay. Wang Chang immediately stood up and pouted, subconsciously hiding his resume behind him. He retorted, What's your aura? We're all in the same class, so where are you so strong? Did you make a flesh and blood deal with me? You're here with me. Upon hearing these words, Ling Weiwei's face immediately turned red and she cautiously scanned the surroundings, afraid that others would hear her. Fortunately, there were no others nearby. The next second, she whispered a warning, Wang Chang, please shut up for me. If you continue to spread rumors, I will call the police and accuse you of slander. At this moment, a slightly chubby man walked towards him. Wang Chang just glanced at the glasses on the man's face and suddenly had a premonition that it was Director Zhao who came. "Director Zhao, I'm here." Ling Weiwei greeted her with a smile, almost as affectionate as publicly holding her arm. Director Zhao raised his glasses and keenly observed the resume in Wang Chang's hand. "Wang, are you also here for the interview?" The resumes in his hand have already been exposed, and Wang Chang didn't know how to phrase them for a moment, so he could only answer with silence. "Since that's the case, as the person in charge of this job fair, of course I need to review your resume and show it to me." While Wang Chang was still hesitating whether or not to hand over his resume, Ling Weiwei took the initiative and pulled it out of his hand. "Director Zhao, please take a look." He wrote in his self-introduction that he is upright, loyal, and has good physical fitness. "Ha ha ha, are you serious? He's really laughing at me." Ling Weiwei glanced at her resume and suddenly smiled uncontrollably. Director Zhao didn't exaggerate as much as she did. She just shook her head helplessly and muttered, "It's really garbage." Then he pretended to be slippery and let his resume fall to the ground, then stepped on it again. "Sorry, you have been passed." After speaking, he led Ling Weiwei to a separate conference room, where the green passage was marked. "How annoying. I shouldn't have come today." Wang Chang quickly picked up the resume covered in footprints and angrily punched the wall. Little did they know that this scene fell into the eyes of Wu Nan, who had just arrived. Wu Nan is not an impulsive person. Even though his teeth are itching with anger at the moment, he still stands still and turns to look at Dr. Jiang beside him. "Dr. Jiang, can your position surpass that of Director Zhao? If we use the food chain as a metaphor, I am a tiger and he is just a cat, do you understand?" said Dr. Jiang with great interest. Upon hearing these words, Wu Nan immediately gained confidence and took the initiative to greet Wang Chang, who was about to leave. "Hello, is this Wang Chang?" Wang Chang paused and looked at the person in front of him, who was a white-clad peer with a mask on his face and a hat on his head, completely unable to see his face clearly. "Do you know me?" To avoid trouble, Wu Nan cannot appear in the face of Li Xiuyuan yet, only in this outfit. "I am Wu Nan's friend, and this is my leader." Wu Nan came straight to the point and also recommended Dr. Jiang. "Are you really Wu Nan's friends?" Wang Chang scrutinized the attire of the two, and at first glance, it was quite expensive, especially the demeanor of that bald middle-aged man. Just standing there, he felt inferior. Can Wu Nan really know people at this level? Wu Nan had anticipated that Chang Gu wouldn't believe it, and if it were him, he wouldn't have believed it either, so he prepared a paragraph of wording in advance. "Wu Nan and I actually knew each other a long time ago. At that time, he was in junior high school in the county town and was often punished by teachers for homework. That's how we got to know each other. Later. In fact, this experience in middle school was the most lonely time for him. He didn't have a mother or friends like Changgu around him, so no one would doubt it." Sure enough, after checking some of Wu Nan's lifestyle habits, Wang Chang confirmed that the person in front of him had definitely lived with Wu Nan, so he let go of his guard. "So it's like this." Wu Nan took the resume from his hand and was about to inquire about the interview when Wang Chang quickly explained, "I accidentally stepped on it just now, and the interview was counted. Speaking of now, I've forgotten about the main matter. Are you coming to Li Group for an interview? My leader said he can help." Wu Nan saw that Wang Chang was about to back down, so he quickly took up the topic and then transferred it to Dr. Jiang. "Let's go and have a detailed chat in the green channel." Dr. Jiang also directly led the two towards the green channel. The three of them arrived at the entrance of the green passage and heard the sound of conversation in the room, indicating that someone was interviewing. Wang Chang immediately realized that Ling Weiwei was inside. He was thinking that he would come back later. If he encountered that arrogant supervisor Zhao and immediately rejected him, it would be a huge loss. In his opinion, these two people that Wu Nan knows are definitely not as senior as Director Zhao. But just as he was thinking so, Dr. Jiang pushed the door in directly. The conversation in the conference room suddenly came to a standstill. Director Zhao was interviewing Ling Weiwei, with an assistant sitting next to her. Everyone looked angrily at the door. Director Zhao's first reaction was displeasure, but when he saw the person coming, he immediately looked frightened and stood up. "Professor Jiang, why did you come?" The ordinary staff around him also showed great respect and quickly stood up. Ling Weiwei saw their reaction and immediately stood up with a smile to greet Dr. Jiang, trying her best to show her etiquette and demeanor. "Hello leader, I am Ling Weiwei." However, the next second, he saw that Wang Chang was following in and suddenly changed his tone. "Wang Chang, what are you doing? This is an interview, what are you peeping at?" Her first reaction was that Wang Chang was taking the opportunity to peep. Wang Chang is not foolish either. When he saw Director Zhao with the demeanor of a mouse seeing a cat, he instantly understood that the big shot was around him. So he forced himself and said, "What is peeping? Are you doing anything unseen here?" Ling Weiwei was instantly enraged, and she naturally knew that Wang Chang had ulterior motives. She quickly cast a distressed glance at Director Zhao. However, just as Director Zhao was about to reprimand, Dr. Jiang spoke up. "It's nothing, I'm just here to pick someone. I won't disturb you." As an elderly worker in the workplace, Director Zhao immediately saw the situation and realized that Wang Chang had not intruded, but was brought in by Professor Jiang. At that moment, his face turned pale with iron. "Of course not to disturb, everything is up to your arrangement." He immediately gave up his position as an interviewer to Dr. Jiang and obediently sat down on the side assistant position. But at this moment, Dr. Jiang began to arrange again. "Mr. Wang Chang, please take a seat." He gestured for Wang Chang to sit opposite, side by side with Ling Weiwei. Then he looked at Wu Nan again. "You can be my assistant." Wu Nan hesitated for a moment. He wanted to step forward, but there was Director Zhao sitting in his assistant position. Director Zhao reacted very quickly and immediately politely led Wu Nan to his seat. He stood on the side and gestured to the other employee to leave. At this point, the conference room became quiet again, but Director Zhao's palms were sweating. Chapter 7. Interview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Director Zhao, I heard that the group only has one position quota at Jiangda. If I mix in like this, it won't affect your recruitment plan, will it? Dr. Jiang asked. It doesn't affect. The talent you have selected is what the group needs, everything is up to you to arrange. At this time, Director Zhao flattered like a eunuch. Wu Nan was immediately shocked. With so many people interviewing outside, only one person was recruited, and the competition was too fierce. Judging from this situation, the final quota will only be generated in the green channel, and those outside are just cannon fodder, yet they are still anxiously queuing up. Okay, I won't interfere with you either. These two are both elites from the current generation of Jiangda. I will conduct a round of testing on them, and whoever passes this position will be given to them. How about that? Regarding Dr. Zhang's proposal, Director Zhao only nodded repeatedly in agreement and dared not have any objections. But this remark in Ling Weiwei's ear caused her scalp to explode. It was already a predetermined matter, but how could it suddenly be interrupted? What annoyed her the most was that Wang Chang was the one who intervened. Where did this guy get the resources? Although she was filled with anger in her heart, she still showed a dignified and confident demeanor. When she looked at Dr. Jiang, she deliberately brushed her hair. Seeing Ling Weiwei's demeanor, Wu Nan couldn't help but feel disgust in his heart. However, he didn't understand why Dr. Jiang had to do so. With Dr. Jiang's power, although he could directly hire Wang Chang, it was just unnecessary. I have a few questions to ask you next, and I will rate you based on the answers you provide. The highest rated one is the winner, understand? Dr. Jiang began to arrange and looked at Wu Nan, saying, "You are responsible for scoring them, and the score ratio is determined by yourself." Wu Nan responded and then picked up the paper and pen on the table. Although he didn't understand Dr. Jiang's intention, he knew that giving Wang Chang the highest score would suffice. The first question is, if you are on a business trip with your boss of the opposite sex and there is only one king-sized room left in the hotel that night, will you agree to sleep with him? As soon as these words were spoken, the air suddenly became quiet. Wu Nan looked at Dr. Jiang in surprise, wondering if this question was serious. Do interviews really ask such questions? Wang Chang and Ling Weiwei looked at each other and didn't react for a moment. But soon, Wang Chang gave the answer. Of course not, the bed must be given to the boss to sleep on. I just need to sleep on the sofa, and I will definitely not make it difficult for the boss. Ling Weiwei remained silent for a moment, carefully observing Dr. Jiang's expression. He seemed to have a sense of judgment in his heart, and then said in a magnetic voice, "Your superior's words are commands, and of course, I must execute them. As a qualified subordinate, it is important to always follow your superior's instructions." Dr. Jiang seemed to understand the meaning behind her words and smiled strangely. Wu Nan's heart tightened as he was afraid that Dr. Jiang would not be able to resist Ling Weiwei's temptation, so he immediately gave a rating. Shua, he wrote 10 points on the scoreboard representing Wang Chang. Ling Weiwei couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She thought the perfect score was 100, and Wang Chang only got 10. However, the next second she saw her scoreboard and couldn't laugh anymore. Wu Nan only gave him 2 points. Isn't that right? Where did my answer go wrong? Ling Weiwei suddenly became anxious and questioned Wu Nan. But Wu Nan was too lazy to explain to her and just gave her a blank glance in anger. Dr. Jiang did not make any judgments and continued to work on the next question. The second question is, if your opposite-sex boss suggests that you can be promoted and paid a raise by spending the night with him, would you accept it? This question is more straightforward than the previous one, and Wu Nan just listened and unconsciously blushed. Wang Chang was stunned for a moment, feeling a bit hesitant. He realized that he might have misunderstood the question just now, and his boss was hinting at him to sleep together. He thought to himself that since he was single, why didn't he get a promotion and a raise? But suddenly he thought of something and asked, "Is your boss beautiful?" This statement is equivalent to saying the answer. Dr. Jiang just smiled and didn't answer him. But Wu Nan was somewhat disgusted and wrote 5 points on the scoreboard. This fell into Ling Weiwei's eyes, and she immediately judged the scorer's preferences. She changed her previous charming state to a reserved one and said, "Of course not, I have principles. If my boss wants to rule me, I will resign and expose him." This answer clearly exceeded Wu Nan's expectations. He was stunned for a while, hesitating whether to give her a high score. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of Director Zhao beside him. At this moment, Director Zhao's face was gloomy, and his gaze was poisonous as he stared at Ling Weiwei. So he no longer hesitated and gave Ling Weiwei a score of 2. What? Still 2 points. What's the point? You're intentionally targeting me. Ling Weiwei couldn't sit still in an instant. She realized she had been targeted and her tone couldn't contain her anger. At this moment, Dr. Jiang was originally holding a lively expression when suddenly a message came from his phone. He lowered his head and glanced, his face slightly changing. The interview has come to an end, and Mr. Wang Chang has been admitted. That's the decision. He finally put on an unquestionable leadership attitude and immediately instructed Zhao to handle the rest of the matter. Please arrange Mr. Wang Chang well and make no mistakes. The next second he pulled up Wu Nan and left the door of the conference room. Wu Nan was in a confused state, but he heard Dr. Jiang whispering in his ear, "Your mother committed suicide in the hospital, we need to hurry over." At this moment, Wu Nan's muscles were tense all over, and his face turned pale. But just as they were about to rush out, Wang Chang followed closely. Two leaders, thank Nanzi on my behalf, and... Before he could finish speaking, Wu Nan and the other two waved at him without looking back, and then disappeared into the hall. Ling Weiwei was listening at the door right now, feeling a bit lost and muttering, Nanzi. These two people were sent by Wu Nan. How could this be? However, before she could delve deeper into her thoughts, Director Zhao threw her resume directly on her face and angrily rebuked, "Get out of here now, I don't want to see you again." Director Zhao, listen to my explanation. Just now, I was just... Ling Weiwei knew it was the second question just now that caused the trouble. She thought she could please the scorer, but ended up getting beaten up. She reluctantly rushed back to the conference room, only to see Director Zhao flattering Wang Chang. Wang Chang, I was really sorry just now. It was my dog's eye that underestimated people, and I almost missed out on you as a talented person. Please don't take it to heart. As he spoke, he kept wiping Wang Chang's resume with his hands, and the previous condescending arrogance disappeared. Upon seeing this, Ling Weiwei threw herself directly onto Wang Chang, forcefully squeezing out a charming smile and massaging his shoulders. Chang, we've known each other for so many years. You can't possibly hold a grudge against me for such a small matter, can you? Tell me quickly, how did you get in touch with the executives of the Li Group? Chapter 8. Intensive Care Unit. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Suddenly, Wang Chang couldn't catch the happiness, so he quickly pushed the two away. Director Zhao, please don't mess with these lies. Professor Jiang just said that he wants you to handle my onboarding. You should hurry up. He pushed Director Zhao away in disgust, then looked at Ling Weiwei inside, shaking his head. What do you want me to say about you? I was in a good relationship with Wu Nan, but I betrayed her just for a job. Are you so cheap? At this moment, facing Wang Chang's insulting teachings, Ling Weiwei gritted her teeth and nodded to admit her mistake. Chang, what you're saying is, tell me quickly. How did you get to know Professor Jiang? Wang Chang looked up and continued to sigh, Wu Nan, this brother, is really a good friend. He is so loyal. We must treat him to a good meal in a few days. As he spoke, he was calculating in his heart that he and Nanzi had been to the high-end buffet at the school gate dozens of times, 121 times, but they never dared to step inside. When the job was confirmed, they must go and see it. Ling Weiwei's face was even more bewildered at the moment. She asked just now to confirm whether Professor Jiang is related to Wu Nan. Wang Chang's performance has already given her an accurate answer. It's really Wu Nan. Wu Nan actually has a connection with the Li Group. Isn't it in vain for me to work hard? She suddenly felt limp and powerless, and numbly took out her phone to find Wu Nan's contact information. With a thick face, she dialed the phone, but a busy sound came from the other end, indicating that she had been blacklisted. She still didn't give up and clicked on the WeChat dialog box, sending a voice message. Wu Nan, I'm sorry. I'm blind. Can we start over again? However, after sending, a red exclamation mark appeared after the message. Director Zhao also realized later that this was related to Ling Weiwei's cowardly ex-boyfriend, and his coldness immediately penetrated from head to toe. He opened a room with Ling Weiwei in front of the other party, and the grudges between them may not be easily resolved. At this moment, he felt uneasy and only begged Lord Wu Nan not to mess with him in the Li Group. Hey! What are you staring at? What program are you going to go through next? Are you talking about it? After sighing, Wang Chang saw Director Zhao in a daze and immediately exclaimed, thinking that he was looking for a job. Immediately. Immediately. Director Zhao immediately reacted and immediately took out the salary evaluation form, starting to ask, Wang Chang, what is your expected salary? Wang Chang suddenly came to his senses and asked tentatively, how much is your group usually? According to the group system, the salary for new employees generally starts at 120,000 yuan per year and reaches a maximum of 240,000 yuan, depending on your abilities. Director Zhao made a request and Wang Chang immediately gave him a glare. I definitely want 240,000 yuan. Director Zhao nodded with a bitter smile. He came to recruit with performance requirements, and if the salary was too high, the HR manager would definitely blame him. However, Wang Chang is a reasonable and unforgivable person, wielding Professor Zhang's Shengfang sword recklessly. That's nature. Despite 10,000 disappointments in his heart, he still had to smile on his face and handed the contract to Wang Chang after organizing it. Wang Chang was also too lazy to scrutinize those rules and regulations, so he signed his name directly with a confident demeanor of putting his bag in his bag. This scene fell completely into Ling Weiwei's eyes, and envy flowed out of her mouth. Even though she had betrayed her body, Director Zhao only agreed to give her a minimum wage. Unexpectedly, this guy Wang Chang just made the right friend and took such a big advantage for nothing. Why are you hanging up on me again? After Wang Chang signed the contract, he immediately took out his phone and called Wu Nan, but was still hung up. Immediately after, he received a text message. Chang, what's wrong? It's Director Zhao who's making things difficult for you again. Wang Chang was momentarily taken aback, thinking that Wu Nan had never come at all. How did he know he had met Director Zhao? However, he didn't hesitate and replied, no, he gave me an annual salary of 240,000 yuan, and I will have money in the future. Don't be polite to me about Auntie's hospitalization expenses. I will cover everything. Speaking of which, this job is all thanks to you. After making a lot of sarcastic remarks, he realized later that Wu Nan already had this connection and would still be missing Aunt's hospitalization expenses. Meanwhile, on the other side of the car, Wu Nan was typing messages in the chat window. Chang, I understand your kindness. I am currently abroad, and Dr. Jiang has arranged for me to study abroad. The salary is very high and I will pay for my mother's medical expenses. The only regret is that we may not be able to meet for a long time. You must take good care of yourself and go to see Dr. Jiang if you encounter any trouble. He will definitely help you. Even before his arrival today, Dr. Jiang had already arranged his affairs. The school received an employment notice from the pharmaceutical department of the Li Group, and his file information was also transferred to the Li Group. When a new employee joined the company and was sent abroad, all the procedures were complete, except for the lack of one person, just like a ghost employee. Wang Chang hesitated for a moment before replying with a voice message. Nanzi, don't worry, I will often visit my aunt. You can work abroad with peace of mind, and if my aunt has anything to do, feel free to come to me. Wu Nan's face showed a heartwarming smile, and he replied with two arched expressions, then his face became serious again. Dr. Jiang, how long will it take to arrive? Almost, I have already asked the attending doctor to handle it. You don't have to worry too much. Dr. Jiang responded while increasing the speed. Soon, they arrived at another hospital in Jiangqing City. A nurse in front of the intensive care unit stood at the corner, feeling aggrieved and being scolded by the attending doctor. I've told you many times that this patient's situation is very complicated. Be careful when doing things, why don't you have a brain? Wu Nan and Dr. Jiang arrived just in time, and the attending physician quickly welcomed them. Professor Jiang, you have finally arrived. The patient's family has been unable to contact them and the outstanding fees have not been paid. If it weren't for your questioning, I really wouldn't know what to do. When he came to see Wang Chang, Wu Nan deliberately turned off his phone and didn't open it until he left the Star Hotel. At the same time, he knew that there were so many hospital calls. At this moment, the door to the intensive care unit was closed, and he stretched his head hard to see the situation inside. He saw a nurse adjusting the messed-up instruments and infusion tubes in front of his mother's bed, while on the other side was a beautiful woman in uniform talking to her. The reason why his mother's emotions were stable now seemed to be related to this woman. What is the specific situation? Dr. Jiang did not rush to take Wu Nan inside, but inquired. It's like this. This morning, when the nurse came to change her dressing, she accidentally left the examination report and payment reminder by the bedside. As a result, the patient saw it and began to lose control. She insisted on committing suicide if left untreated. As soon as the attending physician finished speaking, Wu Nan asked again, "What's going on with that person?" Looking at the uniformed woman, he always had a familiar feeling, but in his memory, he didn't remember meeting such a beautiful peer. Chapter 9. Jiang Yun. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The attending physician glanced at the intensive care unit and glanced more at the uniformed woman, explaining, "It's a coincidence that this girl just came to visit a friend today and happened to see a patient commit suicide." It turned out that the two actually knew each other, as if they were neighbors before. The girl said she had seen the patient's son and that his son was doing well now, which made the patient quiet down. But as soon as outsiders hear it, they know that this girl is lying. Her son is just a driver's representative, and he's exhausted every day and can't even afford to pay for his hospital expenses. Now that he's missing, maybe he's going to pretend to be dead and ignore it. Sigh. Wu Nan didn't get angry when he heard these things, because that's the fact. What he's most curious about now is his identity as a woman. If it were a neighbor, he would think of someone a long time ago. When their family was still living in the countryside, there was a little girl next door who was the same age as him. When he was young, he couldn't socialize and relied on the little girl to take the initiative to play with him. If he really liked someone, it would definitely be her. Unfortunately, the little girl's family situation was even more tense than his. Before finishing elementary school, it was said that the house in her hometown had been sold, and the family didn't know where they had moved, and they never saw her again. If I remember correctly, she should be called Jiang Yun. After understanding the situation, Dr. Jiang led Wu Nan into the intensive care unit. "Auntie, you can rest assured of the treatment. Wu Nan's work is good and he can earn a lot of money. He is usually busy, but when I see him later, I will urge him to call you back." The girl in uniform had a sweet and magnetic voice, which reminded Wu Nan of a program that Wang Chang often listened to late at night. Listening to it, one could feel Wang Chang's bed shaking. Their intrusion immediately caught the attention of the two, especially Wu Nan's mother, who turned her head with a hint of excitement, thinking it was Wu Nan coming. "Hello Auntie, I'm Wu Nan's friend. You can call me Xiao Yuan." Wu Nan looked at her mother's weak and weathered face, and finally suppressed her emotions and slowly spoke up. Upon hearing this, both the mother and the uniformed girl were surprised and panicked. "Where's Nana? Why isn't he coming? Has something happened to him?" As she spoke, her mother was excitedly about to get up. Wu Nan quickly stepped forward and sat on the other side of the hospital bed, habitually holding her hands and unconsciously starting to caress them. "Auntie, don't get too excited. Nanzi is very good. He has found a job with a high salary, but he has just left the country and may not be able to contact him in the near future. He needs to wait for him to change his contact information before he can make a phone call to China. He's just afraid you're worried, so he sent me to tell you." My mother's gaze swept over Wu Nan's face, only to see the mask covering her face. Then she lowered her head and looked at her palm. This familiar feeling was like when Wu Nan came to visit her. It confused her for a moment, so much so that she couldn't hear what the other person was saying. After a moment of reflection, she finally asked with some disbelief, "Nana, is he? He went abroad." The uniformed girl saw that her lie had not been exposed, and quickly agreed with a smile, "Auntie, I told you, Wu Nan is so powerful. Believe it now. Can you take off your mask and let me see you? I don't seem to have seen you before. Are you really Wu Nan's friend?" My mother humbly requested with some suspicion and expectation. Wu Nan immediately turned his head to look at Dr. Jiang. When he saw Dr. Jiang nodding, he took off his mask and revealed Li Xiuyuan's face. Nanzi and I met when we were in junior high school in the county town. Dealing with Wang Chang's same rhetoric again also convinced his mother. Just find a job, hey. I've been dragging him down. When will all this medical expenses end? Although I believed Wu Nan's words, my mother was still very depressed. After all, the surgery cost of 2 million yuan can be considered a huge sum of money, and putting it on these ordinary people is money that they may not necessarily earn for a lifetime. Auntie, don't worry, Wu Nan has already advanced her salary, and your surgical expenses are on the way. They can be received in at most 2 days. You can rest assured to receive medical treatment. Your son is very profitable. Usually, he can only say these words in his dreams. Although he has changed his identity, he still feels a lot of pressure to say these things. However, at this time, he cannot be discouraged and must give his mother hope to live. The surgery cost 2 million yuan, right? Nanner, he. Mother obviously couldn't believe it. At this moment, Dr. Jiang called the attending physician and ordered, "Go check the patient's account and see if there is any money." The attending physician quickly called the nurse to verify the account. The previously scolded nurse hurriedly brought a voucher and exclaimed in surprise, "It's not even in the morning, but now there's an extra 2 million in the account." Wu Nan knew in her heart that it was Dr. Jiang who had just accelerated his actions and immediately received the money. But the attending physician, nurse, mother, and uniformed girl who were unaware of the situation were all somewhat stunned. Nurses and attending physicians naturally dare not associate these 2 million yuan with Wu Nan's impoverished image. They have seen too many such cases, and the vast majority of patient families choose to give up or appear to support huge medical expenses, but in reality, they have already given up. Those who truly come up with money for treatment are rare and rare. Wu Nan was not expected by him, but a miracle happened. Since there was the first surgical fee, the attending physician was considering whether to raise the subsequent fees, but Dr. Jiang immediately stopped him. Nanner, he really made a name for himself. Ha ha ha. At this moment, my mother showed a long-lost smile. Her gaze swept over Wu Nan and the girl in uniform, sighing, "It's his blessing that Nanner has such a good friend like you. If you can contact him, make sure he calls me back. If you don't hear his voice, my heart will never be at ease." "Don't worry, I will tell him." Wu Nan agreed very decisively, but the girl in uniform just smiled and dared not speak any more nonsense. "Auntie, please rest well and we won't disturb you." The uniformed girl was about to leave, and Wu Nan followed her out of the ward. Upon arriving outside the door, Wu Nan couldn't help but say, "Thank you." The uniformed girl was startled and replied with a seductive smile, "Thank me for what?" "Thank you for comforting Wu Nan's mother in a timely manner. If something happens to his mother, I really can't explain it to Wu Nan." Wu Nan's face suddenly turned red. He had little contact with girls, not to mention facing such a beautiful and teasing uniformed beauty. "Actually, I'm lying to her. I haven't seen Wu Nan for many years, but you give me a strange feeling. I feel like you're also lying to her, but I don't think so. Anyway, it's strange." After speaking, the uniformed girl didn't intend to continue the conversation and playfully grabbed his hand, signaling goodbye. Wu Nan looked at her departing figure and shouted, "By the way, what's your name?" "Jiang Yun." The girl didn't look back, as if expecting him to ask in advance, so as soon as his question was answered, she received a reply. "It's indeed her." Wu Nan's face was inexplicably filled with a smile, and at that moment, Dr. Jiang was puzzled and said, "Jiang Yun, how familiar is this name?" Chapter 10. Voting Games. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After pacifying their mother, Wu Nan and the others dared not stay outside for a long time and quickly returned to their own hospital. Lying on the hospital bed, Dr. Jiang conducted a series of tests to confirm everything was normal before giving him a warning. My good brother has a job, and my mother's surgical expenses have also been credited. Now you can rest assured and play Li Xiuyuan. As he spoke, he threw another pile of information to Wu Nan. Wu Nan took over the materials and examined the contents, which were all introductions about the characters of the Li family. The first one is the founder of the Li group, Li Shichang, and Mr. Li. For this famous figure in Jiangqing, Wu Nan has only one understanding of him, which is that Mr. Li passed away due to illness a few days ago, which is the headline of Jiangqing News. Therefore, neither the Li family nor Li Xiuyuan's parents have time to visit him, so he has the opportunity to become familiar with Li Xiuyuan's script. First, familiarize yourself with Li Xiuyuan's lifestyle habits. I have limited knowledge about him. As long as you remember to play a childish role, you won't be doubted. For the rest, after you get in touch with the Li family, slowly come to understand. Dr. Jiang explained again and then left the ward. Wu Nan glanced at the information and felt a bit tired, so she casually threw it onto the bedside table and habitually took out her phone, ready to refresh herself. At this moment, the door to the ward was suddenly pushed open, and a middle-aged woman in a delicate suit walked in directly. The woman was wearing a European-style sun hat and walked in a graceful manner, exuding a sense of wealth and status. Wu Nan stared blankly until the woman approached and lifted her sun hat slightly. It was only then that he was shocked to find out that it was actually Li Xiuyuan's third aunt, Li Xiuquan, as mentioned in the information. Xiaoyuan, are you actually playing with your phone? The woman exclaimed in surprise, and Wu Nan quickly extinguished her phone and stuffed it aside, explaining, Dr. Jiang told me that my grandfather passed away. Since I can't go, I want to take a look on my phone. The recently deceased Mr. Li is both Li Xiuyuan's grandfather and Li Xiuquan's father. Xiaoyuan, you. Wu Nan's reaction surprised Li Xiuquan, and she couldn't help but carefully examine it. Just then, Dr. Jiang arrived upon hearing the news. Director Li, why are you available? Mr. Li's funeral is not over yet, is it? Dr. Jiang showed a stiff smile, clearly a bit unnatural, because Li Xiuquan's sudden visit exceeded his expectations. I just happened to pass by and came by to see Xiaoyuan. You go help me, I'll talk to Xiaoyuan. Li Xiuquan's tone was harsh, as if she was driving Dr. Jiang away. Dr. Jiang could only nod with a smile and dared not ask any more questions. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed that Wu Nan gave him a glance, and he immediately noticed the information on the bedside table and the phone beside the bed. Since that's the case, I won't disturb you anymore. Dr. Jiang talked to himself, pretended to check the instrument, and then casually took away the information and phone. Fortunately, all of this did not attract Li Xiuquan's attention. It was not until Dr. Jiang went out to replace the door that Li Xiuquan sat down by the bed and her voice became soft. Xiaoyuan, playing with your phone is not good for your eyes. I remember seeing you on a regular basis, not just reading books, but also watching the scenery. This good habit should be maintained. At this pause in the scenery, Wu Nan instantly understood the meaning. It seemed that Li Xiuyuan was either reading or daydreaming in his daily life, perhaps reading was a means he used to conceal his days. Thank you, Auntie. I will pay attention. This time she spoke, Wu Nan searched for her childhood feelings and deliberately made her tone more childish. Sure enough, Li Xiuquan's reaction became natural. Xiaoyuan, Aunt San knows that you love reading books the most. What have I brought you? Do you like it or not? Speaking, Li Xiuquan took out a book from her shoulder bag, opened it and handed it to Wu Nan. Wu Nan glanced at it and it was indeed a cartoon picture book from kindergarten. I really like it, thank you, Auntie. You're so kind, Auntie. He continued to speak coquettishly, but he had an idea in his heart. Sure enough, as soon as he had contact with the Li family, he could inquire about Li Xiuyuan's lifestyle habits. Reading is a good habit that can help him cope with many occasions. Just as he felt grateful for it, Li Xiuquan spoke again, making him feel that things were not that simple. Xiao Yuan, since you have received Aunt San's gift, Aunt San has something to ask of you. There will be a voting game next week, and you can also participate. At that time, you will vote for Aunt San, who will come back to buy more books for you. How about that? Wu Nan immediately realized that Aunt San was here to ask him for votes, but what kind of voting would turn him into a fool to participate? Okay, I will vote for Aunt San. Although he was confused and wanted to ask a few more questions, Li Xiuquan's persona forced him to agree first. Then let's make an agreement. I'll find you first. If anyone else comes to see you again, you can't go back on your word. And no one can say anything about this, not even your parents. Li Xiuquan smiled happily and reached out to hook Wu Nan's little finger with her little finger. She coaxed him like a family, we've pulled the hook, you can't keep your word. Wu Nan reluctantly responded, but fortunately, after Li Xiuquan achieved her goal, she quickly left with just a random reason. As expected, as soon as Li Xiuquan left, Dr. Jiang came in. She didn't have any doubts, did she? Wu Nan shook her head. Normal people wouldn't even think of a brain change. Even if a familiar person suddenly changed their temperament, they wouldn't immediately think of a new person. They would only think of whether the other person had been stimulated. I don't think you need to be nervous, the Li family won't notice anything. This encounter made Wu Nan feel that playing Li Xiuquan didn't seem difficult. Dr. Jiang, however, was not quite at ease and reminded, others wouldn't think so, but the Li family would. I mentioned this experiment at a results exhibition, but unfortunately, they were afraid of the risks and decided to kill the project. Wu Nan immediately understood that Dr. Jiang's talent was not recognized by the Li group, so he began to engage in underground research, and he was the experimental product of this underground research. If he behaves too strangely, it will indeed attract the attention of the Li family. After silently nodding, he skipped the topic and took the initiative to mention the voting game. Dr. Jiang, however, was not surprised and explained, when she suddenly came over, I knew something had happened. I just received specific information.